Hey all, so I've been asked for gameplay for my Gauntlet run, but I actually did not record any of it. I just personally felt that um, I would get in my own head if I ended up recording it because I knew it would end up going out to people. And while that's something that I'm working on, I just didn't want to be actively practicing it while doing some of the most challenging content in the game at the moment. Huge props to anyone out there who recorded and or streamed their run. Incredible respect for that. I just didn't want to do it this time. However, I can still show off some of the strategies and tactics I used in these fights, and so I've got some duels here for you for that purpose. Now, obviously, these duels do not have the specific nodes that the defenders do in the Gauntlet, but I still think that this is one of the best ways to not only show the strategy, but also for you to practice it. If you are in a competitive war alliance, you probably already do duels regularly. It's a very frequent ask at that level. And the simple reason is that it's better for you to realize exactly how an interaction works or to make that mistake or to get that spacing wrong when it doesn't count than when it does. So I'm going to go through some of these fights here. It's mostly the Tigra ones because those are kind of the weirdest. There's tons of gameplay up there for, I think, almost everything else I did. But if there are any of the fights that I took that you guys would specifically like to see, I can try and recreate them in this form. So I'm starting off here with a Crossbones versus Korg fight, which is not something I actually did, but I was asked if this one would work, and so I figured I'd just try it. I am not the best Crossbones player by any stretch of the imagination. I haven't really messed around with mine much yet, but I just wanted to show off like what I think the basic tactics would be, and therefore what some of the limitations are. Now, uh, Korg is a hero, so Crossbones is going to work better against him than against most. However, there's still kind of this issue. Korg does have crit resistance, which means that you are not going to gain many Furies as replacements for crits, which means that you're not likely to get to 5 Furies until you get to a bar of power. And unfortunately, that means that you're only looking at a 75% ability accuracy reduction, which means you probably are going to be proccing Gauss charges, and you are going to be taking some Thorns damage from Rock Shield. While you have 5 up, you're good to go. And I probably should have heavied there. Like I said, I'm not a Crossbones expert. But I'm pretty sure the idea here is where you can, you're going to want to punish those specials with heavies. Like, see, there one Thorns got through. I'd gotten lucky up until then, and it took off a huge chunk of my life. Now, this 4-star against a Sig 200 Korg may or may not be accurate to what would happen in the Gauntlet, but I just don't think that it would end up going terribly well, honestly. So now we're into the Tigra fights. One of the ones that I actually wasn't planning on taking originally, but I'm very glad I did, was Dragon Man. Because the stun immune Dragon Man in the Gauntlet is a bit of a pain. Quake can do it if you turn off the power gain by lining up her concussion as it tries to come back, but it wasn't really working for me, so I did this. So notice how I blocked one L1 to remove his power charge, and then I was aggressive enough to make sure that neutralize was up when it would come back, and now it's gone completely. Now, the Dragon Man in the Gauntlet has Aspect of Evolution, which both makes the fight harder and makes it easier. You are not able to block attacks forever because his block penetration and attack values will keep going up. Not entirely sure what happened there. I've never been reparried by the AI before. You wouldn't have to worry about that in Gauntlet. But You definitely don't want to do that. I got lucky, and this fight was not a good duel, which is why I'm showing another one. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the aspect of evolution works against you, and that you can't take a lot of blocked hits because you'll just die to block damage. However, that is a progressive problem, and so you can safely block hits early on. As things go on, though, you will not be able to block hits. However, he will be gaining so many special ones that you don't have to worry about it, and you actually end up having a ton of openings for your heavies. You just have to get the spacing down, which is why that's the single most important thing that I'm practicing here. You don't have to worry about his L2 because you just bait out the L1. But you want to make sure that you have the evade and then the heavy counter for his L1 down absolutely cold, and that you will not make other stupid mistakes like I have a few times in this first one. The idea behind dueling is not just to do it until you get it right. See, there I made another one. But to do it until you can't get it wrong, if possible. Obviously, we only get 5 per day, and after that you're probably spending units, and conserving units is a big concern if you're running the Gauntlet. But especially if you are currently farming revives and potions, then start this process now. Notice I'm also using, I believe this is a rank 3 4-star, and I'm doing that because I want the relative balance between our PIs to be closer to what it is in the Gauntlet. Now, challenge rating is a thing, which is why I'm not using a 3-star in this vid, because that would just be too much and the block penetration gets ugly. But, pick one where it kind of makes sense and you have enough time for things to go wrong and to get into your rotation. Whatever rank you have, the champion you're using, just try and get them at a place where the fight will be remotely comparable. Like, I could use my 6-star Tigra, but then this fight would be over in like 3 heavies, and I didn't learn anything. And the whole point is to learn. See, that's how you want to throw the L1. Only the second hit is unblockable if you throw it on a dashback like that. However, it's much safer because there's almost no way the second one won't hit. And that is much more important. You'll notice that I counter a few heavies in here. Be very careful with that and make sure you plan it, because the spacing is a little tricky. Sometimes it will feel like you leap forward and just wreck him, and sometimes it will feel like you do a little dance in front of his face and then get smashed. The trick to knowing the difference between the former and the latter is just to practice it. And honestly, if you're not 100% on it, just don't try and heavy counter any of his heavies. Stick to the L1s and intercept when you need to. Don't worry about your senses falling off, because the important part of this fight is what you did at the very beginning, when you turned off his power gain and just turned him into a big, beefy defender who will kill you if he hits you. But that's manageable. So from there on out, just play using Tigra as best you can, stay alive, land your heavies and your specials where you can, but you don't have to take risks because he will come down. I probably did more fancy things in my actual Gauntlet fight, but I also got hit a few times. So what I tried to show you here was the safe way to play it. So next up we have this Black Panther Civil Warrior. I'm backing off immediately rather than blocking and baiting a heavy like I normally would, because I'm trying to simulate the node I'm preparing for, where he starts unblockable because of Vigorous Assault and Arc Overload. Notice right there, I hit into his block and procced an armor up, so I am treating him as though he is unblockable until it expires. Similarly to with Dragon Man, Tigra's Neutralize, if it turns off Arc Overload coming back once, then the node will be gone completely and it will never come back. So you remove a huge complication of this fight by just having Neutralize up the first time it comes back. So right there is the biggest risk of this fight, and honestly, why I wouldn't hit his block if you don't need to at all. That was a significant mistake to this fight, and I shouldn't have done that. The other thing that I practiced a lot before taking this fight myself was you can counter his L1 pretty efficiently like that, but notice how I wasn't doing it early on. Try and get to the point where you have it every time, and this fight will be a lot better. That said, you'll notice I do parry, I do block a few of the L1s, and that's because I didn't feel 100% certain that I was going to nail the evade and then the counter. And as long as I'm keeping neutralize up and keeping his armor ups under control, then I can block him, so that's fine. Now we're on to this Apocalypse. Kind of a similar situation to the Black Panther, honestly, because the way that I normally fight Apocalypse with Tigra is bait I bait a few heavies against my block, and then I counter them to get my ruptures rolling and to gain a bunch of power. However, the Apocalypse in Gauntlet starts at 4 charges if you use a hero against him, and Tigra is a hero, meaning that he can stun you on light attacks through your block. Now, of course, that's only well-timed, or that doesn't trigger on well-timed blocks. So if you are an absolute god of reparrying, and you can make sure that you have the parry timing for every single hit in his combo, then you can do that. You can just keep parrying him, take almost no damage into your block, never get stunned, bait out a heavy, and then the spacing is that much easier. However, what I recommend is just taking advantage of the fact that Tigra will not take block damage from his specials because you just keep baiting out that L1. And then this fight is pretty safe. Slow, but safe. The purpose of Tigra in a lot of these Gauntlet fights is not to get flashy videos that look good on YouTube. It is to use her unique utility to make difficult fights safe. Remember that as you're practicing, and things will work a lot better. Now finally, I'm not really a Quake player. I'm not a huge fan of what she does to the game, but I did bring her because she is an excellent Korg counter, and I don't consider Korg a particularly difficult champion to Quake. And as we saw with some of the others, and as you know if you've watched some YouTube vids, he's pretty difficult with a lot of other champions with his unique node combination in the Gauntlet. So if you are thinking of taking Quake, and you would describe yourself kind of the way that I did, you need to make sure that at minimum you can do this duel right here. You have to be able to solo this 6-star rank 3 Korg with a 3-star Quake, and ideally without taking any damage or dropping any heavies. If you cannot do that, you are not ready, in my opinion, because it only gets harder from there. So if you want some tips, one thing that I do is I reset my heavy at the end of every combo. Whether it's a 3-hit combo, a 4-hit combo, or a 5-hit combo, I watch for his second medium, where his head goes down, or his 4th light, where you get that kick, and that's when I go and heavy again. I don't stick to a strict heavy dex, heavy dex, heavy dex alternation, because I find that if they finish their combo, wait just the right amount of time, and then immediately medium again, they can catch you on that dex if you do it without thinking. There are some people who seem to be able to get around that. That's just something that I've never had success with, so I prefer resetting after every combo. Another thing you want to watch for is dropping heavies, and so that means that you are going to need to keep at least your peripheral vision on the timer for aftershocks so that you know when he's going to be stunned. Because the easiest way to drop a heavy is to have him charge in, think he's going to trigger your heavy evade, and try to dex, but he doesn't make you evade, and now you've just dropped your heavy charge, and the attack will take priority over you trying to dex. So watch that, and you will see a couple times in this fight where I actually don't dex as he's stunned, and I take a minute to go back into my heavy, because I was more willing to let a little bit of damage go by than I was to let even a single heavy drop. Now, before I was prepping for the Gauntlet, I actually did this fight with a 2-star. I would recommend that as well. Just, if you are trying to do this piece of content as efficiently as possible, then do these duels and do them with the weakest version of the champion that you have that still has any hope of getting through the defender. Like, I wouldn't necessarily use a 2-star Tigra on that Black Panther because I think that it's actually important to be able to block occasionally and just try and get a realistic expectation of how much damage you'll take from that. I didn't use a 3-star Tigra against the Dragon Man because the whole fight hinges on blocking a couple hits at the very beginning. And I actually think that it can even be a good idea to block a full combo and then use your combo immediately after he finishes either his last medium or his last light, because that's one of the best ways to make sure your neutralizes up as the power gain comes back around. So you don't want to go too weak, but you want to go as weak as you can, because the defenders in Gauntlet have massive health pools and you need to be prepared for it. So in my opinion, especially if you're farming, like I said, start doing this process now. You have 5 free duels a day, use them. Take those 10 minutes, whatever, and if you're going to use Quake, Quake Korg. If you're planning on using Quake against anybody else, especially someone stun immune, make sure that you Quake Nick, even if you're not planning on using Quake on Nick, but that's just one of the easiest ways to practice Quake against a stun immune character. If you're using Tigra, make sure you duel with Tigra. Make sure you know which specials and heavies you can and cannot safely counter. Make sure you know when you can use wake-up intercepts, if that's something that you're going to do. I used wake-up intercepts throughout my fight against Korg. I did not use them against Dragon Man because the recovery animations are different and it was not as safe, and I just wasn't risking it. You know, if you were using Apocalypse, try and get your rotations down. Try and make sure that you test his heavy counters. Like if you're using Apocalypse against Sasquatch, you want to make sure that you can land a heavy counter in Wrath of Tanarak. That's a very important timing if you're taking that fight. Plan these things out and make sure that you can reliably do all of the individual things that you need to do to win that fight. And check that off your list before you enter the quest. Good luck, everyone. I know a lot of people are currently farming and getting their teams ready for this. I hope everyone who's trying it is able to complete at least as much of it as they want to. I will probably record some more of these at some point. Like I said, if you have any requests, anything that you'd like me to try to do or get footage of from somebody else, let me know. Again, good luck, and I'll talk to you next time.